Hi, everybody.
Hi. Should I pass out the blankets?
Someone complaining already.
Yeah, there is a question here. There's a few questions in the room as well. But this is a question from Donna McIntosh, and I hope everybody's doing well. By the way, I'm just trying to get my cheaters on here. It's very disturbing when I look at myself with my glasses on. For those of you who understand that last statement, you're very metaphorically inclined. Highly spiritually developed. Now it's darker. Okay, now I'll have to sit right here. She's talking about the title she gives it is Our Eternal Journey, Personal or Impersonal. And then she goes on. Biblical tests would have us believe in a Heavenly Father who cares about us individually, even as a sparrow falls, God sees and feels our pain. I don't remember that part in the Bible, but anyway, nonetheless. But there is a hymn that went on when we were little kids. He loves me so, he loves me so, you know that one there. And but let's go on. This seems very personal to me, Donna says. You also talk about us having a personal relationship with consciousness. I do. I'm guilty. Yet you have also spoken about us as simply energy beings connecting to each other and to all living beings, which I've done. Which would lead me to think that we as individuals don't matter that much. Donna, how you got that, I have no idea. If there's an infinite flow, that's in everything alive, then we have to matter. And we have to matter personally and as part of the whole as well. And there are people who would disagree with me on that. They say, well, they go to the other extreme. There's no personal, it's only impersonal. And you can read about this stuff almost anywhere and everywhere you go. You can read it on both sides of the fence. I just don't happen to think that there's a separation there. However, as we dial in to what we want versus what energetically versus what we want personally, it ends up being a little bit similar depending on kind of the attitude. We want things that relate to us to make us feel better in a life that doesn't last very long. I don't think you would want immortality with the same body, although I've been told that some people like their bodies and they would like to continue on with them as long as they don't get older. That's the other feature in this thing. Unfortunately, some of us have noted from time to time that there is something else going on about the age thing. I don't agree with that. It's not happening, even if I see it. Well, maybe it is. If you can see without thinking about the superiority of a human being versus other beings, it's easier to understand. If you look at an energy form, for example, you were talking about the soul here, Donna, and for me, this energy form, chakras, Zephyroth, all this sort of thing, these things are an aspect of the soul, and perhaps more than that at the same time. Whatever names you want to call them. We have to call them names, otherwise we don't find them, as functional unless we call them a name. And we're engaged with those names in a manner that is directly related to how we think things are, because that puts the emphasis on us as being naturally more valuable than any other levels of existence. following that kind of logic, any beings from other planets that happen to be superior and more able than us are more logically more able than us, and then we are really kind of not that important. So get to not being exceptionally important first. Now you don't have to worry about losing that kind of attitude about being superior. This is very difficult in our world, simply because in our world, our view of the human structure, being superior, is very valuable to us because we happen to be human beings. In fact, that whole universal structure of energy and the soul is very interesting if you look at it from a broader perspective. Internally, we can handle so much energy individually. If we have an increase in our emotional disposition gets stronger, no matter what it looks like, no matter how it is. If we could only see better, then we would see where it was getting stronger. And then, if we could only notice it better, had more awareness, we could actually say something like, oh my God, I didn't even know I did that. Maybe I could slow that down a little bit. Then you would be adding, in a kind of personal manner, not a negativity towards yourself, not a negativity towards yourself, or a judgment of yourself, or a judgment of others for that matter, but a recognition that something is there that you hadn't noticed before, and you're just for the first time attempting to see it. And in that, a higher level of energy, or consciousness as you call it, or universality, if it were higher, would not see anything very negative about a person for the first time noting that something is there. Unless you have a different idea of a higher being than I do. See, I guess my idea of a higher level human being, or universal being, is a being who sees everything, doesn't want to interfere with anything, and doesn't call anything negative, but does note how a person is able to engage with energy flow so that that flow can be increased, and how that person can be trained internally within itself, including itself, to notice that it has things that it might be helpful to soften. And when automatically you're willing to soften, see, and understand those things that lie within us all, then if you see them in others, you're inclined to be less judgmental. You're inclined to realize that the person has not been able to handle that level, that particular area very well. And perhaps later on they will be, and perhaps not. We only live 100 years if we're lucky, or perhaps 100 years if we're unlucky, depending on how you look at it. So when you're looking at these things, if you're looking at the possibility that one of these chakras or valves can be turned on and adjusted if the person can handle more insight, adjusted, open a little so that more energy can flow in and be able to function differently than they could before, or be able to notice those things that they couldn't notice before, and perhaps come up with an idea that relates to not necessarily agreeing with what they're seeing. Our dilemma is that we often agree with what we do. I think simply it's of great value to not necessarily agree with what you do until you really do. And if it's okay, you can disagree with what you do, or what you think, or what you value, or what you devalue, or what you conspire internally to maintain as a personality image, for example. And we have many images that we use. These are basically ego states, survival states, another way to say it. So none of this is negative, as far as I'm concerned, but a higher being wouldn't do the judging. But the implications are in some of these kinds of things in the old biblical background imply, big guy, long beard, heavy duty hammer, hits it on that thing, and you got it. Don't think so. That makes no sense at all. But for us, it makes a lot of sense. We do this all the time with other people and sometimes with ourselves. Doesn't help. Doesn't help at all. You being judgmental about other people doesn't help them. Because you engage with that. It's like a transmission. You send that out to them. How do you improve? By increasing the intensity in them to do exactly what they were doing before. Doesn't make any sense. But to us, it elevates us individually, not helpful. If you become superior, then you add superiority to the whole. Interesting. If other people treat you with superiority then, as if you're not very much, then you are the one that's been stimulating people to be superior because you've been acting that way. That isn't really helpful. But that's the nature of the human condition. This has been going on for eons of time. So from my point of view, it's not negative, it's just unwieldy because we don't get to notice it, because we devalue the things that we believe need to be devalued, and we really heavy-duty lift up ourselves for doing it. Same would be true if you were treating yourself negatively. You're superior as a negative person. Blah, 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 blah. No, don't think so. You want to make a deal and say, well, I can be more negative than you can. Mm-hmm. Well, you go on with that, but all you're doing is hurting yourself. I know this is a question that's not about you, but it's a decent question, so I have to treat it with respect and try to be as honest as I can with this. I cannot leave out the logic, the needed logic that needs to be there when emotional reaction is strong. All of us have emotional reaction, and it is not helpful. But when we have it, we would think it would be helpful, but it just makes us feel worse. The trick in that one is to try and calm it down the best you can, knowing full well you won't be perfect at it. So do little bits at a time, I would say, to any of us, and that would begin to be helpful. We make habits of everything. Things that might be helpful a little bit inside, we need to make habits of. But it's real hard for us as a human being. We do the best we can, and we read all kinds of stuff, and we believe all kinds of stuff, and we look for stuff that agrees with us. That's part of the condition. That's why we grow awfully slowly on this level, because we don't believe that we need to interfere with those things that we already believe in or that other people believe in. Thinking is a very difficult thing to do. Thinking is often not linear. It's not a monologue about being right or wrong. It's a dialogue that you do not have to agree with. And when you do, you can go internally and reconsider it. One could say that takes too darn much time. But when you're thinking about large issues, like the universality or the stream of force that is infinite, including all life, no matter what it is, that puts too much pressure on us to be careful about engaging with others. And we don't want to do that. We just would like to be on the surface bouncing up and down about some of the religious responses or engagements and call them right and call them wrong. There's a funny thing about that. We also validate ourselves when we're doing that. I think it's hard for us to understand the meaning of a huge species like us being impacted upon by others, and us being a part of the impacting on others. That would make us all tend to want to be philosophical. And depending on what our jobs are, what we're doing generally throughout the world, we might not be able to do that because it may not come naturally to us. Some of our great atomic scientists had an awful time with this one. Schopenhauer, Einstein, had terrible times with this. What happens if what we believe is true? Is true. It could be the end of the planet. Are we legitimately, emotionally mature enough to deal with not using things that we can create and not doing things that we can do for the good of others as well as ourselves? These big questions. And these larger questions that are asked lead to those kinds of questions. And so that when I see questions like this, it's not that I like the logic of it, it's that these heavier, larger questions are interesting because a lot of thought is of great value. Yet you have already spoken to us simply energy beings, connected to each other and to all living beings, which would lead me to think that we as individuals don't matter that much. I don't know how that logic got there. But you're not the first one to think this way, because there is such a sense of devaluation. How could any higher level love ants that get in your house and eat your wood? Termites. It's just straight nonsense. Yeah, it's not nonsense at all. We live in a world that's kind of semi-chaotic. What are you doing in this chaotic world to survive? Hopefully not asking questions like this. But you are doing you with all the images that you have in your orientation is the same as we are doing us. And the same is true for us. We're doing our best to use those images to survive and make sense of the world. I am not sure how our past lives matter personally, except as evolutionary experiences to help us evolve and eventually function on higher causal planes. Let's take a look at that for a second. Our past lives, as an individual form, as a human individual form, are monitored through these centers or chakras that we have. They're very pixelated, infinitely small. Those structures can handle tremendous numbers of lives. It's not only about the lives themselves. We have to think in terms of something that we can put our finger on: shirt, dot, dash, slash, whatever. We can understand that. But it's very difficult to understand the glowing of a life. If, for example, you have a dozen lives that have glowed not only with expectation of reaching higher levels, but the actual engagement with reaching a level that is different than what you would normally have reached. It is glowing in a manner that opens a chakra more, affects the lives that you've already lived, affects those lives at the same timeline that run into you. That happens without you knowing, in a kind of a sense. We're lucky that's true. Because we would naturally, in our world, tend to take credit for that, when there's no credit there at all to take. So you have all these 12 lives, and each one of those timelines are affecting a center that is moving towards opening more, so more energy can flow through, so you can be helpful here as a being of service, whatever that means for you, or anyone else for that matter. So here you go. It's glowing. Because it's glowing, energy is moving, let's say upward, like a fire, you could say. It's a symbol. Energy flows into the neck area, for example. Begins to stimulate the throat center so that the lower personalized will becomes fused with broader considerations, deeper thoughts. As you know, as we all know, might know, when we think, we run into ideas that make us excited. And then in a rethink, we move to another idea. And we might even move to another idea because of the fact that we were thinking of this previous idea, then a new idea, then a new idea. That's 3 ideas. Oh, actually 4, the one before. We even had the original idea. Then all of a sudden you realize you have a totally different way of perceiving that you couldn't have had initially, because the 3 sequential ideas that you come up with prepares you to have this next idea. Then all of a sudden, now that's the only idea that we have. It's the great number 1. We have determined that this is the way it is. Depending on our emotional disposition, we will protect those ideas as valid and only valid. This we do as human beings. This is neither good nor bad. It's just the way we do things. It's kind of very scientific. And that could be annoying to anybody that's more, let's say, or less scientific. But in fact, that's how we often do things. Our dilemma is that we get hooked into ideas and we can't go past them. This is normal. But now you slither past them and you have a new idea. And you're willing to have another one. The willingness comes out of the throat center. The willingness to have an idea beyond what you had before, that validated you before, doesn't really make you comfortable anymore. The throat center itself broadens out the internalized, personalized will so that it can actually get to the point where it can identify a link, a sense of a link with others. Doesn't mean you have to like it, but there is a link there. that personalized will, you have to have somebody to push up against. The broadening out of that will, slowly you begin to encourage yourself to read, to engage, not necessarily to only believe. And that throat center starts making a track into a level of perception that goes beyond what you could have actually gone into in this life. That throat and broadened neck and throat area behind the neck begins to engage with the forebrain. We say the brow center, and stimulates the nervous system. Your curiosity becomes piqued, and it becomes a little bit introverted, not only extroverted so other people can see it. The nature of thinking is internal often, or it can be external. You can talk to yourself. Many people frown on that, but you can. You can have a dialogue with you. And you can consider various things. But you must be careful that the emotional dispositional center links with the throat center and not only the personalized will only, because it will defend the personalized will. If the will is broadened out, it will engage with and encourage the personalized will and not stop too long at that personalized will, meaning it will get you to want to think different thoughts. It can be very confusing. Confusing in the sense that you will go to your best defenses. One of them really is for many. I don't understand that. I can't. No, that doesn't make sense to me. I can't understand that. And these are people with IQs about 120, 30. And they will go to that because they need time to think it through. And they think they need to dialogue, this personalized will dialogue, with others and tell them that they don't understand it, so that the onus is on the other person to think it through for them. That's the emotional disposition. It means that they've dropped their personalized will from a broadening to a narrowing back into the places that protected them as they were growing up. And they're usually very dynamically, emotionally active, not logical, dynamically, emotionally active. This is all through the species, constantly. It's a very difficult dispositional structure to adjust. Then as this emotional structure begins to engage with that throat center a little bit more curiously and helpfully, there's a broadening that goes on in the emotional structure, where it is curious to come up with ideas. So it lends its emotional intensity stronger to the mental structure. Because remember, the will is connected to that forebrain, connects with that energy behind the neck, connects to the forebrain. Just trying to follow through on these chakra things that you brought up as an energy being. Trying to give you examples as I go along. So this is a very, very valuable thing to think about. Then what you start having then is insights. They come any time of the day. But they don't have to be right. They're there to prepare you for an understanding that's broader than the insights themselves. I find that very fascinating, because you as an energy being are then being prepared to go beyond where you were before. As you called it down here, evolution. Well, evolving meaning energy is actually getting stronger in you. It's being cultivated through the brain and the nervous system itself. And you're trying to make sense of things. Not jumping to conclusions, But by then, you're beginning to realize that there is a tremendous amount of allegory and metaphor, not only in the Bible that you were talking about, but in life itself. When people are angry, it's a metaphor for fear, nervousness, engaging. They're scared. Or they're justifying. They're reaching to justify the idealized, personalized will. This is normal for all of us. If you had a number of people growing in that area, it may be able to affect a lot of people on the planet because reflexively we help others. Consciously, man alive, we engage as if we're the kingpin and everybody else is just people. Well, you told something to, they should figure it out and get it over with and do it. We kind of do that in our personalized will, and it happens all the time. This is part of the personality images that we are related to. All of the emotional dispositional stuff is related to that personalized will. It is not negative. It's a method of engaging with life. And it broadens out as time goes on, as it broadens out for all of us. I don't want to miss anything here, so let me just take a look. Yet surely this evolution only happens through our personalized will and effort. Personal will and effort, not surely. There are so many things that we do not know we are changing, or we are becoming aware of, or we notice in other people, and we regretfully miss it in ourselves, or we may see something consistently in other people for a little bit of a time, and then suddenly we realize, oh my God, I do something similar. Not the same, oh no, but similar. In fact, that is a method that the soul, or a higher level, teaches us through. You engage with an increasing perceptive relationship with you personally. You become a little bit more aware and less defensive about what you were before as an individual. Same is true for me, same is true for everybody. And suddenly you're attempting to try to understand what you're like inside, because you're noticing more and more how others are, and you're wondering if you're similar. It's not about being right and wrong. It's not about being bad or good. I don't think the Bible was ever meant for that. The Bible's a guide. Some really good ideas in it, some not so good ideas. Lots of war, lots of battles, take over that place and I'll help you. Lots of stuff that relates to the personal will. But when you're dealing with an individual and you're learning that perception is increasing a little bit, there's one thing that happens with every individual. I don't think there are any exclusions, although there might be one or two people that I've met that maybe haven't gone that route this time, went that route before. They start getting a little bit nervous about the fact that they are changing. Energy is getting a little stronger. As it moves through you, you're seeing more than you want to see. Speaking in the plural for all of us. And suddenly you're noting that you're not as happy with what you're seeing in you. You have a reaction to that. This is normal. If you did. Well, that would be quite normal. And at the same time, you might consider that others would have a similar reaction to the same kind of occurrence if it was happening in them. There's a direct movement in that recognition. to an understanding of what compassion might be like, or love. You don't want to interfere with anybody, but it's dreadful if a person does things that might hurt you. It appears that they might not love you. I mean, if you're in a relationship, that stuff happens all the time. I mean, the ideal relationship, without any doubt, is a person who does exactly what you want them to do whenever you want them to do it. No doubt about that at all. Only problem is you'd have to get rid of that person. They would remind you too much of you. You couldn't stand being in the same room with them after a few weeks. But that's not love. It really is. It's self-love. It's the love you have for you. That initial root gonad center, solar plexus, heart center, throat, brow, crown, all of that stuff has an aspect of that in it. For all of us. The trick is trying to see through it. In other words, there's going to be a lot of stuff you don't agree with when you engage with life. And more. But you have to become a little philosophical and say, okay, now I'm seeing those things. I thought I really considered them valuable. I'm seeing less value in it. And I'm noting that I'm like this and I'm like that. 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 Really, I'm quite a broad person. But I'm not necessarily as interested in remaining exactly the same way as I thought I needed to. And everybody's dealing with that in their own way. Or dealing with people who are similar to that so that they can learn from them. Friends, people who are not that friendly. But you understand that because you're not always that friendly anyway yourself. But you have good defensive systems to protect you not seeing that kind of stuff. I'm talking about humanity here. I'm not talking about you or me. I'm talking about humanity. The question relates to us individually and personally. If there is the lower levels in us, then there is the middle levels. The coarser, the finer, the more refined, even the elegant. That includes higher levels where your perception is focused only on that flow and basically not on anything else. Must be lonely out there. Because if you look at it from one perspective, in our world, it is rare for people to have any clue about that flow of energy. Everybody talks about it like they know it, but not many have it. The awareness is what I'm talking about. Everyone who is alive has that flow moving in them. That's why the idea of being superior, because you can finally notice it, is really of no consequence whatsoever. The superiority is nothing worthwhile because everyone has it. You're just aware of it. Doesn't mean you're extra special. It just means you're a little bit more aware. It's a key thing when you're reading these wonderful texts to look at them as if they're trying to tell you something metaphorically. Something that's engaging, but they didn't have the words to speak it out well. And here we are, a few thousand years later, trying to make sense of it. And all of a sudden, in our world, we're making sense of everything on the surface now. My goodness, we've even forgotten from the 12th century and 11th centuries how to think of things metaphorically like they used to. No, it has to be this way, it has to be that way, it has to be word for word. We're missing a lot. When a person tells me they don't like me for a reason, I worry about the fact that they're hurting. Also the fact that they may not like me. But it's usually because a person is hurting inside. And they're talking about themselves. And that's very hurtful. Better that they don't like me, that they don't find out that it's them they don't like too soon. When they can notice it, then they make, hopefully, they realize how silly it is. That it really doesn't matter. That they're okay. There's a universality inside of them that is tremendous. They're not in contact with it consciously yet, but it lies within. And they will perhaps have another form that it will also lie within. But what you develop in this level, and if you come back into this level again, that old development, it does not die. It comes back. It's there for you to see, and you will be helped to see it by the expanding, broadening energies that move through these centers into the levels that are related to conscious awareness. And this is vital. That's why so many people are attempting to help people on a conscious level, energetically, without their awareness. Because people fight the fact, if they were aware of this flow moving through them, they would actually have to say something like, I think I noticed something moving through me all the time. Then in our kind of world, they could go to a doctor, say there's something wrong with them. Or be okay with something like that happening. Try to find out if anybody knows anything about it. And be patient enough to be okay with learning bit by bit. Because our defenses are strong to remain the same. Yelling and screaming like crazy when we're just about to open up more. No, 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 there's not, it can't be true, you know, all this sort of thing. You and I wouldn't do that, but I've heard people say that. It's not a dispositional thing, it's a survival thing. Nothing is negative about that. It just isn't as helpful as we believe it is, but it's the habit that we've been involved with. I hope this helps a little bit. I wrote some notes and I'm not sure whether I left anything out or not. Yeah, I think I covered most of it. I hope that helps a little bit. And trying to make sense of something like this is to activate curiosity in a different way as opposed to, you know, being frustrated with it. Just trying to make sense of it. I wish you well. I think there was another question. What was it, Mary Lou?
Well, I had asked about the chest. There seems to be a lot of emotion in the chest. And when it's different from what I've usually felt. And I feel a pull to pray.
Oh yeah.
So I'm just wondering, is it just the solar plexus moving in?
Can you repeat the
Oh yeah. Well, the question is around the chest coming on in a slightly different way than what Mary Lou was used to, and whether it, and she feels a pull to pray. And can you feel the solar plexus as well?
I didn't notice actually. I don't
Oh,
notice when that's
okay.
happening.
Well,
I just put the light map in
yeah.
front of the
So you
chest.
did the like that. What happens is, if you remember, um, the heart center comes on. Usually, there's an indicator that the throat center is coming on. Usually, the two of them work together. If it's the upper part, and the neck becomes a little broader, you feel the breadth of the neck a little bit if you're conscious of it, and then it's as if there is a sweep off the body, kind of, and behind the back, and the chest comes on in the upper part, which means it will draw and pull energy from the lower system upward. It does this because it's already there. Normally people have energy moving through them and they don't even know it. We work like crazy, pay a lot of money to get it to go through in that kind of a way. But what you're trying to do is become aware, conscious of this stuff. So that chest right here opens up across here and here, and it impacts the neck, or the neck impacts it, and then it stimulates the brow, because these three will work together. Fair enough? Um, so when that kind of happens, you'll also notice that maybe your arms will be open more, with some people, backs of the hands, armpits, a little warmth all around. Can happen if it gets stronger. The root center will come on stronger. Energy will try to come up the front. I would suggest, if you notice energy coming up the front, that you immediately move to be aware above your head. That will help it. And also behind you. That will pull it so that you don't forget the back. The back is just as important as the front. So when you're focusing on above the head and the back, the energy will come up into the belly. You will feel it pull backwards and upwards, if you can notice those things. If you can't notice them, you could just do the pump and a simple dropping of your head, pulling back on the lowest part of the neck. And you will notice then the root center will come on. All you need is to do it a couple of times. If you're aware, the root center will come on, because a root counterpart lies in the area related to the dowager's hump, right here. And it's like you're turning on that root. Pulls the energy from the root center upward, and you'll be able to feel that energy come up the back of the head and over top to link up. It'll link up down here like this and down here, about 3 different ways. It normally tries to go head back towards the area you're having trouble with, and you're having trouble with this area just above the solar plexus, and energy is going around it, so that's where you'll feel it the most. Okay, so be patient with it, meditate, ask for some help for it, and continue. One more question? Yeah.
And I think it relates to what you're talking to. Sometimes I do feel energy coming into the throat. It's just as if it's lapping.
Yeah, she's just saying energy does come into the throat, and it's just coming like splashing. Or is it through the throat or up towards the face?
Up into this area.
Okay, well, up in through this area. It can go different ways. It can come up the side of your face, come up around here. It can come up and make your face just glow. If that kind of thing is happening, what I suggest is you just take your hands like this. You can't see this very well. I apologize about it. Out about a foot or so. towards both, focus towards both sides of your face, like that, and point towards the temples. Point your hands towards the temples, like that. Stay there for a little while, maybe about 10 minutes. See what happens. Focus on the little finger. You can barely see it. You want to pull it back. Focus on the little finger, and then just bring it to your chest and throw into the ground afterwards. If you throw into the ground, the energy will go down there, all the way back up towards the top of the head. So all you're doing is make a big, big circle. Okay? Okay, it's about 10-2. Yes, did you have a question? Your hand went up. I just wondered if you had a question. Okay, all right. Fidgety? Okay. Yeah. Joel?
There was a question about what's
Habits?
the difference between addictive, energy-wise, between an addictive process and the self-interested process?
Okay, I'm going to try. What's the difference between an addictive process and a self-interested process? Not much. Addictions and habitual methods of engaging with life are extremely similar. They're habitual. Nothing is negative there. I look better with the glasses on. I think I have. Pauline, I hope you weren't looking at that. These are methods that make you feel comfortable. Ways of engaging with life that allow you, with a bit of zeal, to feel comforted by the actions that occur. The dilemma with them is there's no thought in them. It's tremendously emotional and tremendously involved with the root center, often with the gonad center, but the first three centers very strong. Can it, if you had a question, could it go up to the brow as well? Yes, it could. The personalized will is very vulnerable. I'm just talking to Joel. So the personalized will is very vulnerable. It will tend to want to grow, but it will tend to want to be protected. So will the energies from that lower system, or so-called the personality developmental stages. I think all through your life to the day you die, you have personality developmental stages. There is never a time when you do not. Personality is here so that we can use its sensory systems, all the systems that it has, the eyes, the ears, the nose, the mouth, the way of engaging, how you present yourself, all these things. You do that for the purpose of constructing a form that is presentable from your perspective. Often you may not even notice you're doing all these things, totally unconscious. The habitual responses, the engagements that you have, are really basically self-protective aspects of nature. You are protecting a nature of you that is vulnerable. You're protecting against being vulnerable. And this thing we call personality, in fact, you can do almost anything. You can have a carpet and walk 4 times around the carpet every morning when you get up, and you somehow feel better. You can always have a coffee instead. You'll feel, or a cup of tea, no caffeine. You can have 150 strokes of your hair. Now you're ready to meet the world. You can burp 4 times and let gas out in other orifices, and also be quite content with the idea now you can face the world. We had a little one at home where almost every week you had to stand beside a wall and see how much you'd grown. The world seemed a little stupid after a while, honestly. But every now and then, when you thought you'd grown about 2 inches, you head for the wall to check it out. These things are consistently there to make you feel a little bit more secure. It's a sense of security that comes out of every level of engagement, as low as the body and what it thinks it needs, because it's thinking. The brain is at the root center. The will and what it believes beyond any doubt has to be valid, and the will is between your knees. Of course, unless you're highly sophisticated, and the will is everywhere in higher levels, and you know you're right. That usually indicates your will is still between your knees. But you can have a sense of values that are related to spirituality, and you believe beyond belief that you're highly evolved, and you're running a fairly coarse road. I do not think that that is negative. I think that is normal for us. But you ask about that process, and the process is one of a habitual pattern that is kind of soothing the system. And our personality is made up of all of these things to help us survive in the world. If you're dealing with these things and you try to engage with them as if they're the enemy, you're in trouble. Because you're saying, my habits, not the habit, is wrong. Therefore, you are wrong. If you look at it and you say, this is not helpful, and there are many habits, I do not think that this would be valuable for me, then that's a different story. But if you don't tell yourself that you're only dealing with this one comfort zone, then the whole set is in mathematics, set of comfort zones becomes highly strung, highly defensive, will not take the move to revise. And in most of our habits, that's exactly what happens. It's very difficult to separate habitual responses. Really hard. I had a friend who smoked normal cigarettes and had a great time rolling them and then drinking coffee with it. Oh, it's a known fact that nicotine and caffeine do a real good job together, like they're buddies. So, but if they ever stopped rolling their cigarettes because they were really hooked on rolling them, they couldn't stand smoking normal out of the store stuff. They would stop smoking if they ever stopped rolling them. Because rolling was a community thing. 3 or 4 people got together and rolled cigarettes. It was more important than anything else. So I said, well, why don't you stop rolling cigarettes? Are you completely nuts? I said, then why don't you sell the cigarettes that you roll? And they did think I was a little off. The problem was, the dilemma was, the habit. If you get into a habit of being important because you're smart, look out, you're in trouble. If you get into a habit of being smart and move that smartness to something that might be helpful, you're not in trouble at all. You're saying, wow, you will soon find out that you will reach the apex of your intelligence capacity. And from there on in, you will struggle a little bit to come up with ideas that are different than the ones you already had. This is a process of thinking, by the way. Nothing different than living. Suddenly you will be thinking in a manner and say, you know what, these things don't work. Maybe if I come at it from a different angle. That habit will relinquish itself. It will pull back and allow that new habit to present itself. Still thinking mode. It's a different way of thinking. Belief has a tremendous amount of importance in the process of how you see yourself. It's not always intelligent, often reflexive. extremely often habitual. These habits are unconscious. You can't see them very well. So most of the soothing techniques that we have are unconscious. They're reflexive. Eating is another one. Anyone ever had trouble with that? Pooh, all of us. You just name it. Those things are. I can't because. I don't understand that. What is this about? Oh, no, that can't go there. If it goes there, it destroys about 3 of my habits, and that's not a very good idea. That's not helpful. These things are consistent in all of our personalities, except if you're a therapist, and then it's difficult for you. Because how could you be wrong if you're a therapist? I'm poking fun at Marlene and whoever you are.
Lori.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's been a thrill to talk to you, and I hope you're, if not thrilled, certainly not too much not too much asleep. Can't find the words. Anyway, take care.